On Tuesday, the UK published its latest employment data, and it didn't make for happy reading. According to the ONS, between August and September, the number of payroll employees in the UK fell by 32,000, far higher than the 3,000 or so analysts expected, and taking the UK's overall unemployment rate to 5%. This is both up from 4.8% last month, and, if you exclude the pandemic, the highest since early 2016. So in this video, we're going to take another look at the UK's worsening unemployment crisis, and why it might be even worse for the Labour government than you think. If you're interested in topics like this, we discuss UK politics regularly on our podcast Starmergeddon, where we track the success and many missteps of Starmer's Labour government. Find it over on the TLDR podcast YouTube channel or in your favourite podcast app. So let's just start with a deep dive into the data. As we just mentioned, in September, the UK economy apparently shed 32,000 jobs, taking the unemployment rate to 5%. This means that, in the 12 months to September, the UK economy has apparently shed 117,000 jobs. Interestingly, the recent increase in unemployment has been exclusively driven by men. The unemployment rate for women has actually held steady since April, while the unemployment rate for men has risen by 0.7% in the same period. To be honest, we're not entirely sure why this is, but it's worth noting that this divide is particularly stark for younger workers. So far this year, for instance, men aged 18 to 24 have seen their unemployment rate rise from 13.8% to 15%, while women in the same age bracket have seen theirs fall from 11.9% to 10.1%. Now, to be fair to Labour, this isn't entirely their fault, and the UK's unemployment has now been rising relatively steadily since the middle of 2022. Nonetheless, things have apparently accelerated since Labour took office. The overall unemployment rate rose by 0.6% in the 2 years between September 2022 and September 2024, but has now risen by another 0.7% in just the year since. Nor does it look like it's going to be easy for the thousands of new job seekers to find a new job. The number of vacancies has fallen steadily since the pandemic, and is now at its lowest number since mid-2015, again if you exclude the pandemic. Furthermore, there's been some suggestion that the official unemployment rate understates the real scale of joblessness in the UK. This is because the official unemployment data only counts those people who are looking for but failing to find work, and thus ignores the millions more people who are economically inactive. There are always going to be some people who are economically inactive, simply by virtue of their age, but the UK has seen a remarkably steep increase in the number of working age adults claiming to be economically inactive, largely because more people are claiming sickness benefits, i.e. claiming to be too ill to work. Having fallen steadily for the preceding 15 years, since the pandemic, the number of people claiming sickness benefit has risen rapidly, reaching 3.2 million in 2024. Quite a lot of this has been driven by young people, with record numbers of 16 to 24-year-olds claiming some sort of long-term sickness benefit, and more people, again especially young people, claiming to have debilitating depression or anxiety-related disorders. While some of this increase is presumably the result of a genuine increase in long-term and chronic illnesses, it's worth noting that the UK has seen a far steeper increase in working age benefit claims over the past couple of years than basically any other developed country. Most of the UK's G7 peers, for instance, have actually seen their economically inactive rates fall relative to where they were before the pandemic. The only other G7 country to experience an increase has been the US, although this is at least in part because, thanks to a relative lack of public or affordable healthcare, more Americans have to quit work due to illness or to care for ill family members. This is perhaps the main reason the US has historically had higher levels of economic inactivity, and it's a problem that's only getting worse over time as the US population ages. Anyway, you get the idea. The unemployment rate is high and rising, and might even understate the true scale of the UK's joblessness crisis. Now, of course, this is bad news for Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves in and of itself, but it's extra bad news for at least two reasons. First, inflation is still higher than either the government or the Bank of England would like, with the year-on-year inflation rate currently at 3.8%. Not only is this nearly twice as high as the Bank of England's target rate of 2%, it also makes the UK somewhat of an international outlier. For context, for most of the post-pandemic period, the UK's inflation rate has essentially mirrored that of peer economies. But in recent months, the UK has started to diverge. You can see this if you compare the UK's inflation rate with that of the EU. The two lines basically track one another until the beginning of 2025, when inflation picks up in the UK, but remains around the 2% target in the EU. The UK currently even has higher inflation than the US, despite the presumed inflationary impact of Trump's tariffs. Anyway, this is extra bad because it makes the Bank of England less likely to cut interest rates in the future, or at least cut them as fast as they would otherwise. This is because while lower interest rates would probably help bring down the unemployment rate, they would also risk stoking inflation when it's already too high. The second reason this data is extra bad for Starmer and Reeves, however, is that it complicates their plans to improve workers' rights. For context, back in October 2024, the government published their new Employment Rights Bill, which aims to make good on a number of Labour's manifesto promises, and is currently going through Parliament. This bill essentially creates a number of new protections for workers, including a number of measures making it harder to fire employees, strengthened sick pay, bereavement leave, a ban on zero-hour contracts, and a conditional right to flexible working. While these might all sound great, employers and businesses have argued that they will discourage hiring, and this argument has more purchase when unemployment is rising, and when that rise in unemployment could plausibly be the consequence of some of Labour's other policies, like the recent increase in the minimum wage and increase in employers' national insurance contributions. The bill has already been put into jeopardy by the downfall of Angela Rayner, who was perhaps its loudest advocate in the party. But this most recent data might cause some extra hesitation in number 10 and number 11, which won't go down well with either the Labour left or anyone who read the manifesto. All in all, the rising unemployment rate is clearly bad news in and of itself, but it's extra bad news for the current government because it's unlikely to be relieved via rate cuts, and it interacts in uncomfortable ways with their ongoing plans to strengthen workers' rights. By now, you've probably heard all about this story online, but depending where you read about it, you might have heard a completely different side to the story. So how are you supposed to know what's real and what's being fabricated by one side or the other? Well, this week we're lucky enough to be sponsored by Ground News, who are experts at helping you rethink how you consume media online. Their website and app collects thousands of articles, putting them all in one easy-to-access place to help expose outlets' political bias, how reliable their reporting practices are, and who owns them, with all of their information backed by ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organisations. Whenever we're faced with a nuanced story, we just head straight to Ground News to get the breakdown on everything we need to understand it better. For example, if we wanted to learn more about this story on the UK's rising unemployment rate, we just need to look on Ground News to see that 74 sources are reporting on it, with equal coverage from both sides, with the left emphasising regional nuances like Scotland's falling rate, and the right framing it as a challenge for the government. You can quickly see who owns the outlets behind each story, and that context matters. Once you start noticing how independent sources frame stories differently than massive conglomerates, it changes how you read the news. We've even used it to filter out corporate-owned media when we want a wider mix of voices, or hone in on the highest rated factual outlets. It's one of the few tools that actually lets you shape your media diet, not the algorithm. You know that it's no secret just how much we appreciate Ground News. Having such an incredible tool to help us stay fully informed and aware of political bias is a game changer in today's media landscape. As such, we've partnered with them to offer TLDR viewers 40% off their Premium Access Vantage plan. All you have to do is subscribe through the link in the description, go to ground.news/TLDR or scan the QR code on screen, and you'll be supporting an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent.